First of all, everybody thinks they know what they mean when they say the Crusades. Where do we get the idea of Crusades? Are these a series of discreet actions taken by Western Christians? Are the Crusades some sort of massive blueprint that was put into place by the Pope? When did we start talking about the Crusades?
Generally speaking, the time of the Crusades, or when we kind of mark when the crusading movement began, a movement really that lasted almost 600 years in the Church's history, so an extremely long period of time. And they began by Pope Blessed Urban II, who preached the First Crusade in November of 1095, so at the end of the 11th century, and at a local meeting of French bishops at the Council of Clermont. As you go through the 600 years, each event that we historians now later refer to as a crusade, first, second, third, whatever, were discrete expeditions called by the Church to defend, usually, Christian territory and to recover territory that has been taken by Muslim forces. So they're discrete actions in response to an aggressive and violent Muslim attack.
Now, we often hear that the Crusades are a reason Muslims are so unhappy with us today. When did Muslims begin to think that the Crusades were a problem as a unit?
So one of the major modern myths is, this source of modern-day tension between the West and Islam today is because of the Crusades. And Bill Clinton, famously, former President Bill Clinton, gave a speech in November of 2001 where at Georgetown University, no less, where he said that the reason why the United States was attacked on September 11th was because of the memory of the Crusades and everything that happened in Jerusalem in the 11th century. And when you kind of pull the thread on that myth and look at it in detail, you see that really, the Arab world didn't become most focused or interested in the Crusades until the 19th century. The first history of the Crusades written in Arabic didn't appear until 1899.
Wow.
So the very end of the 19th century. And that was written by an advisor to the Ottoman Turkish Sultan, who was trying to explain why the empire was falling apart, why the empire was collapsing. And he kind of used the Crusades as a form of Western, as he saw it, as an early initial Western effort at colonialism, and used that as propaganda to, kind of place the blame on others, not on the policies of the Ottoman Empire itself or their economic issues, but rather on something external and place it on the West. And they just happen to be a nice, convenient historical boogeyman for that advisor to use. And that's where it starts, and then it picks up steam in the 1970s with Arab nationalism, and then obviously into our modern day where you have people like Osama bin Laden and the Taliban and others using the Crusades as propaganda to recruit unsuspecting and unknowing and ignorant, really, followers trying to right the so-called wrong of these Crusades, which, again, was not historically the issue.
Didn't St. John Paul II say that the Crusades were an enormous mistake, it was a moral infraction, and he actually asked forgiveness for the Crusades? What do you say?
No, I try to kindly, gently point to them charitably that, you have to understand the theological context and historical context and what St. John Paul II was doing in March of 2000 in that day of pardon. And when you read through his address from that day, when you read through the prayers, when you read through what the International Theological Commission put together on that whole topic, the word crusade doesn't even appear anywhere.
Yeah.
Yep. So he never specifically came out and apologized for the Crusades, as many people report.
Yep.
Rather, he was trying to prepare the church to enter into the third millennium with a kind of a clean slate, so to speak, and of asking God for forgiveness for the sins of the individuals who have come before us in our church's history. But in no way, shape, or form was that a repudiation of any historical events necessarily, or the Crusades themselves. So, I point that out to them and just say these are not events that the church has ever shied from. We need to discuss them and know them authentically. And it's not to say, and when I speak of the glory of the Crusades, I don't mean that everything was triumphalistic or everything was fantastic or great or whitewash anything that was bad. But I don't do that at all. But rather, we need to get rid of the anti-religious false narrative that has been present about these events, this anti-Catholic narrative that has been present about these events since the Reformation, really,
yes.
And most specifically originating really in the Enlightenment period. The Crusades were always seen as defensive, just wars in terms of the eyes of the church and those who participated in them. And they meet the criteria for a just war, one of which is the recovery of territory and property that's been taken or stolen. Also, to defend yourself, self-defense, another criteria, which is, again, what the Crusades really were, at least, again, oriented towards Islam. And that's, these people, that's what they saw. I mean, they were participating in something that was greater than themselves. It was of service to God and to the church, and they did so out of love for God, the church, and even for the concern for their own salvation. And if you take the populations of Christendom, Western Europe at the time, and compare it to today, if there was to be another call for a crusade and do the math, that would be 1.3 million Catholics responding to this call of the Pope. So it's substantial. It was huge. And the First Crusade was very successful. They achieved their objective. They liberated the holy city of Jerusalem from Islamic control. And then these Crusaders returned, and they came back telling a story of what happened. There were books that were written, published even in vernacular languages, for those who could read, to be able to read that, and for people to hear the stories of these Crusaders. And they were, their events were enshrined in art and stained glass, and their stories were passed down orally. So this was a huge movement, culturally speaking, not only for the church, but also within Europe itself.
Should Catholics regard the Crusades as fundamentally a positive enterprise?
So we as Catholics, should never shy away from something that obviously the Pope supported, that saints also engaged in and encouraged people to participate in. So that's something that we need to know about. We need to know the authentic story and not allow modern secular media to present their version of that history to us, because it's inaccurate and false. And we need to take hold of our own history, learn it, study it, and defend it.